Hi, welcome. Marissa Pensa joining you today, and I'm actually joined by Eddie Williams today, and I'm going to let Eddie introduce himself.
Sure, thank you, Marissa. I've got 16 years experience as a trainer, as a speaker, as a management coach. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, former Airborne Ranger and Green Beret, so clearly my perspective is how do you lead people, and that's a great topic for today.
Excellent. And as you can tell, Eddie's what he talks about and what he'll talk through with us is very, very complementary to what you've heard from Methods in Motion thus far. So I'm really excited to have him joining us today. So the purpose for this session is to review some of the most critical aspects of being a manager and the best practices around setting expectations with your team to really increasing your influence with your team. And so with that, I want you to think about there's really 5 levels of leadership. So you know how we talk about there's 5 ways that a prospect or customer can view a salesperson. They can see him as a seller, they can see him as a trusted advisor. This is very similar, but more in terms of 5 ways that your team could see you. So let's just play this out. Is level 1 is the only level that is gained by position, by appointment, is you have the authority, you have the title, but real leadership is not just having a title, but really being able to lead people and have somebody that's willing to follow you.
And one of the important premises here is you lead people, but you manage things, projects. So we're going to look at the first part of that. How do we lead people effectively?
So I have the position. I need to lead people effectively. Level 1 being I hold the position. Level 2 is the relationships. And so I can't just gain relationships by appointment. I got to earn that. And so people on your team, do they know that you care about them as a person? That you believe in them? Relationships really provide the glue that hold long-term production and really create long-term production.
Some of us might be able to relate if you're married, where, by ceremony, you are a spouse, but you've got to build a relationship in order to get things done and have a peaceful home life.
You're correct. And so it really, whether it be the relationships in our work life, the relationships in our personal life, level 1, I've got the position. Level 2, the relationship. Level 3 is where we all want to get to as quickly as possible. But I can't just skip to that. And so that's really where the production comes in. So on this level, good things start happening. The team's in their momentum. They've got profit, revenue. We're hitting goals. We're hitting the metrics. We call it the big mo. And then level 4, just very quickly, once we get to level 4 leadership, people are following you because of what you've done for them. You've proven that, hey, you know what? If he or she said to do it, I'm going to follow that. And there's such a high level of trust there. We can't snap our fingers and get to that one, nor can we do that for level 5. And it takes a lifetime of proven leadership to get at a level 5.
There's a common saying that I've heard and used oftentimes in my presentations, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So your sincerity, the relationship that you've developed with them, how you treat them, how you regard and respect them are critical, especially when you get to this stage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we're going to spend our time, as you kind of see on the screen, Blueprint for Growing Your Influence, we're going to spend our time on getting to even the position 3 is knowing and doing the things that drive growth. And so one of those things that drive growth is effectively managing your time and effectively leading your team to manage your time. Eddie, could you share with us a little bit about this time leadership matrix?
Sure. What we're trying to do here is take everybody's time, which is clearly a very critical resource, and look at what's urgent in the upper left corner and what's not urgent in the right side. And then on the bottom, you've got what is not so important but might be urgent. And then the very bottom right, what is not important and not urgent. We all have things that we need to do. We're trying to just quantify where should it go in our priorities. Clearly, we'd like to stay on the top 2 boxes, what's important, and minimize what's on the bottom 2 boxes. And inside of each of those quadrants or boxes are just some examples of what would go in them, something that's critical or something that's not critical, something that can be planned out down the road.
So as you assess this, and I think each of us, we have to evaluate our time of what do we do that's urgent and important, what bucket does it go in, but just think about how do you spend your time, or what quadrant do you spend the most time in? And so some of the things that you can ask yourself, maybe Eddie, kind of talk us through what some of the things you can ask yourself when you're evaluating the quadrants.
Sure, and that's critical here to look at what are you doing right now? Are you performing the task expected as a manager? Where are you spending your time? And like I said earlier, what quadrant are your priorities going into? And then we'll also look at self-assessment. You've got to critically look at yourself and say, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Am I doing what's important to my job or to the organization?
You know, and I'm thinking about just relating this to, and I'm sure you've received like daily, weekly, monthly essentials from our management program, even for our train the trainer process. So are there tasks that maybe we're not giving the right level of attention to, and what impact is not doing those? For example, making the thank you calls to every single brand new customer. If that's not getting done, what's the impact of that if we don't do that? It may not be in the urgent and important, but it isn't important. And there's an impact in terms of our attention if those aren't done. How well are you delegating to your team? We're going to talk about delegation today and communication of expectations.
And there's some value that we should all add as a manager. This is an example right now of a quotation from Sparky Anderson, who was a manager way back when with the Detroit Tigers. And here's what's important. He gave the baseball to Tom Seaver, a perennial Hall of Fame pitcher. And he gave the person who could do what they are doing best the tools to do it. And then he sat back and watched. And as a manager, sometimes we don't need to be involved in all the aspects. We give the person that can do what they need to do the tools.
When we talk about giving our team the tools, I mean, clearly communicating expectations, I want to talk a little bit about delegation today. And there's a difference between truly delegating versus just dumping, randomly unloading. But I'm talking about really carefully and skillfully delegating something. And so, Eddie, what do you think are some of the benefits of delegating?
Well, delegating will do a couple of things. It will allow us to recognize, like the earlier quotation, what are the skill sets of the team members. Give them what they need and then allow them to develop with those tools. That will help their growth. Then you can trust them. You'll see them perform. They can trust you that you know they will be able to do what they need to do. Mm-hmm. And that's a good scenario for time management. You don't have to do it all, especially when you have developed your associates to do more.
And so when I think about things that we ask of them to do, I'm going to give you some specific examples that will most likely sound familiar. So these are types of delegating with your inside sales team. So for example, number one, having them schedule specific types of calls for you to hear during side-by-side. Sometimes some of the frustration with not getting sign-offs showing that we're progressing in the sales process is they never send you a recording, or you sit at their desk and, hey boss, I made them all yesterday. And so communicating in advance what calls you want to hear and at what time, or let's say another example would be coming prepared to a mid-month review or a end-of-month review with an assignment you've given them. You don't have to do all the work. Make sure they come with their commitment list or their new account list, or maybe a third example might be sending you recorded calls for a specific date and time. And so any of these are things that are critical to the team's success, but it doesn't have to be all on you. It's effective delegation to your team.
And along with that delegation goes communication. So up front, you're going to wanting to delegate to the team, but you're going to set assignments. You're going to communicate specifically what is expected, and then you have the results of what those expectations are, especially when they're joint calls or reviewing of recordings.
So Eddie, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Maybe I'm being cynical a little bit, but let's just say that we have a manager and they're listening right now, and we've communicated expectations clearly. Here's what I want for the meeting, or you pull up your chair for your side-by-side or splitter time, and they didn't do what we asked them to do. Kind of just talk us through, from a leadership standpoint, what are some things you would recommend to a manager?
Well, if the expectations weren't met, folks were unprepared for the calls or the joint sessions together. Clearly, there's a breakdown in communications, you could do a couple of things as the manager. One is still spend a few minutes to say what went wrong here and let's talk about how to fix it for the next time. I would not go ahead and go through the meeting because you're not going to accomplish much since the expectations weren't met. Look at yourself as a manager. Maybe you might not have communicated clearly. Maybe it wasn't received the way that you thought it was received, and then reschedule for a more effective session.
What kind of message does that send to the person if you don't reschedule?
If you don't, you're just meeting to meet, and that's not going to be very productive or very effective use of time. And again, we've been talking about time management, but it also sets the stage for the next time. There are going to be expectations that are going to need to be met. So let's do that. Let's talk about it very briefly, what went right, what went wrong, and let's fix it for the next time and move on.
As a recap, evaluate and just adjust the quadrant you spend the most time in. Master delegation and the communication of expectations. And then number 3 is hold your team accountable for the expectations that you set and know what you're going to do if those expectations are not fulfilled so that we're not surprised. It has been a pleasure talking with you today and hope you have a fantastic day.